I'm James Gardner, host of Your History, Your Story, a podcast for everybody who loves stories about interesting people and events told by those who uncovered them from within their own family trees. This, we hope, will inspire you to discover and celebrate your history and your story. The very popular situation comedy, Happy Days, ran for 11 seasons beginning in January 1974 and ending in July 1984. The series was set in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in the 1950s and early 1960s and was centered around teenager Richie Cunningham, played by Ron Howard, his family, and friends Potsie, Ralph, and the local tough guy Arthur Fonzarelli, known as the Fonz. A prominent figure in the Cunningham family was Richie's mom, Mrs. Cunningham, affectionately called Mrs.C, played by actress Marion Ross. During those 11 seasons, Mrs. C earned a place in many people's hearts as America's mom. In this episode of Your History, Your Story, we will be joined by Marion Ross, who is 94 years young, and her son, actor, comedian, and impressionist, Jim Meskimen. Marion will share a few stories from her autobiography, My Days, Happy and Otherwise. Stories will include her childhood in Minnesota and her dreams of becoming an actress, her early career in movies and television, and her rise to stardom in her role as Mrs. C on Happy Days. I'd now like to welcome Marion Ross and Jim Meskimen to our show. Welcome to you both.
Thank you so much.
Happy to see you.
Yeah, we're at Happy Days Farm, which is where she lives.
Yes.
It's a beautiful sunny spring morning here in the valley.
Very nice. Now, Marion, I think you may know that I interviewed your son, several months back, and we had a good time on that interview, Jim.
Well, Jim's a lot of fun. I like to be with Jim.
We've been together a while. We met about, over 60 years ago now.
I love it. I just am so thankful, Marion, that you were able to join us on this call. And your book, My Days, Happy and Otherwise, is fantastic. When did you write that?
It's about 5-6 years ago, I think, as she wrote that. Yeah, we put her together with a very talented ghostwriter, David Laurel, and she told her stories, and it was marvelous. And afterwards, she did a book tour and went all over the place.
And I met lots of people that were involved, with it, and it meant a lot to me.
We met a lot of fans all over the country.
Marion, in your book, you start off really going back to the very beginning, your earliest memories. Can you tell us about your mom and dad? Could you start with telling us about your mom? What was she like?
She was very brave and daring, and she's a Canadian.
Brave and daring, yet a Canadian.
But raised up in the prairies, and a lot of spunk. She was beautiful.
Very, very nice. Now, your mom had Irish roots, didn't she, Marion?
Yeah. Irish, and they came to this country. So she's actually born in Canada.
Okay, but her family roots were in Ireland. Now, you mentioned in the book that she was very encouraging to you to be anything that you can be, right?
My mother said, you can be anything. You can do it. You can. It's just wonderful like that. I said, oh, okay, Mama, I will.
That's great. And what about your dad?
My father was a Scotsman, and he was serious. And we say, Daddy, it's a joke, Daddy. It's a joke. It's a joke, because he took everything very seriously.
Now, as far as his occupation was concerned, he was an electrician, right?
He knew electricity very well and traveled all around with that. So it's interesting.
Worked in the Panama Canal, right?
During the war, he was down in the Panama Canal.
Yeah. So there's something you talk about in the book that you would sit around the table and your mother would love to tell a lot of stories, and your father maybe wasn't quite as interested in the stories as you were, but I think you used to have a lot of fun with that, didn't you?
We did have a lot of fun with it. And it's funny how you don't want to have the stories told by the wrong person at all.
You also mentioned that when the Great Depression hit, I hate to give away your age, but you do say it in the book. You were born in 1928. That's the year before the stock market crashed and the Great Depression started. And that affected your family.
It affected my family as much as everybody. I thought everybody was under the cloud of this depression.
You mentioned that you and your sister had to take your bedrooms down into the basement, didn't you?
It's at some point we did decide to live down in the basement.
Your mom took in a boarder, so you had to move the bedroom, right?
Yeah,
I think you were renting the room to make some extra money because it was the Depression.
I think so. But we slept in the basement, rows and rows of canned goods.
Well, you had plenty to eat down there, but it sounds like you were doing what you had to do because they were renting the rooms upstairs to make a little extra money and you were downstairs. But while you were down in that basement, you started to have a dream, didn't you? What did you start dreaming about?
I always had a lot of plans. I was going to who I was going to be. I was going to be somebody so special, so bloody special. Yeah. And it was just fun to be with my mother, because she had dreams and you could be whatever you wanted to be.
Yeah, and that rubbed off on you. So you were down in that basement and you were dreaming about someday you were going to be maybe in the movies or on stage or something like that. When you emerged from that basement and your dad actually moved the family to San Diego, correct?
Yes. That was interesting. San Diego, because they had the Globe Theater there. They had so much going on to, get excited about. And it was just wonderful. I went to San Diego State College also. So that was good.
So you all of a sudden, these dreams that you had as a child were coming into fruition. You went to San Diego and you started taking classes in drama and things like that.
Well, they have the Globe Theater at the San Diego in Balboa Park, and Greg Noel was the head of the theater, and it was thrilling. So I just kept hanging around that theater and become an actor.
You did. And so when your mother said you could become anything you wanted to be,
it's just wonderful. Yeah.
What a great mom to have. So you did eventually, you started to get some roles and you became a contracted actress, right? With Paramount.
Oh, I did. It was thrilling because here I was always going to Paramount Studios, trying to audition. And finally, they picked me up and put me under contract. And there I was at Paramount Studios. My gosh, it was thrilling. That's all I can say to you.
You had some really interesting people that you got to see back this was like the early to mid 1950s. And your first movie, if I have this correct, was called Forever Female. And you were in that movie with Ginger Rogers and William Holden. What was it like for you in your first movie?
Forever Female, my God. Ginger Rogers was wonderful to me. And in those days, so many big movie stars were on the lot. And at lunch time, there would be, oh, look who that is. Look at that and that. So it was just thrilling.
Oh, that is terrific. Now, I see that you were in movies with Humphrey Bogart. You actually met Humphrey Bogart. What was he like?
Oh, he's very nice to me. It was wonderful. I loved it. Yeah.
We can recreate that moment if you like. I'm not sure if you're interested. It's a very tender scene where Humphrey Bogart opens the door and says, "Marion, it's you again. Come on, what are you drinking?"
I love that. Jim, you are an excellent impressionist.
He's so darling. Yes.
And he did some great impressions on the interview we did with him. And first of all, one thing about Humphrey Bogart is that I found out that he's a distant relative of mine.
Good heavens.
Yes, Humphrey Bogart. I mean, it's really distant, but I did some family research and all of a sudden I saw the name Bogart and I tracked it right down to him. So yeah, I didn't make it on the screen though, Marion. I didn't, maybe on the computer screen, but not the big screen.
Well, but God bless you. You know where you come from. He was a very wealthy guy. You know that.
Yes, but it didn't trickle down to us though. I'll tell you that. It didn't make it through the whole family tree. As a little girl, you had mentioned in your book that you read a lot of like Hollywood magazines and things like that. You must have thought you died and gone to heaven.
Well, we did. And we went to the drugstore and bought all of the movie magazines. And it never occurred to me that I wasn't going to make it in Hollywood. So when I was like 21, I guess, that's when I was put under contract.
Must have been so exciting for you, Marion. And then not only did you, I mean, you did a whole bunch of movies. There's Forever Female, Sabrina, Teacher's Pet with Clark Gable. You're in a movie with Clark Gable. What was he like, Marion?
He was wonderful to me, and he was always nice to me, and make a fuss over me, and it was really nice.
What a great memory. You also did some television, and when I saw two of the shows that you were on, it brought back memories of watching these. Probably not real time. I'm 60, almost 65, but this was a little before my time, but I certainly watched them on reruns. Were the Burns and Allen show.
I was on the Burns and Allen show, right? And I couldn't believe that I was doing that show because I had a very unimportant part, but I mean, they were there forever, Burns and Allen. My gosh.
Yeah, and you were part of that. And also the Lone Ranger. Did you ride a horse?
She didn't ride a horse. She was the rancher's daughter.
It's funny. I just interviewed, and it's going to be one of our episodes. I just interviewed the granddaughter of Roy Rogers and Dale Evans.
Oh, did you?
Yes, and
Good.
she was terrific. Then I thought about you, and I thought the Lone Ranger, that must have been something else. Now I'm going to fast forward now to this tremendous thing that happened to you, actually to the country, because it was the most amazing show and lasted 11 seasons. Was Happy Days.
Yeah.
Marion, what was it like to be a member of the cast of Happy Days with all those other great actors?
Happy Days, I tell you, it was Paramount Studios. And when you think that Henry Winkler became the Fonz, Ron Howard was my son, it just was an unbelievable time. We all had fun together, and we went into the big commissary and all had lunch and just
all those people together in that room. And you got this opportunity to try out for the role. It must have been very exciting to you. Did you know Gary Marshall before Happy Days?
No, I didn't know Gary Marshall before Happy Days at all, but he was so wonderful because he's such a good man, a really good man.
Yeah. Now, Jim, let me ask you.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember when your mom?
By the way, all these stories are available in Mom's book, My Days, Happy and Otherwise. She talks about working with Cary Grant, with Clark Gable in detail. And anybody who's interested, pick up My Days, Happy and Otherwise by Marion Ross and David Laurel. You can get it on Amazon, and it's a great read.
It is. It's enthralling. It is.
Also did the audiobook version. She narrates her own story, and I got to participate, as did Ron Howard, Henry Winkler, Anson Williams, and Marion's assistant, Gwen.
Very good. And Ron Howard actually wrote the foreword.
Yeah, he wrote the foreword to this book.
Yeah. So, Jim, do you remember when your mom landed that role back in 1974?
I don't remember the incident of her landing it exactly. I know that she had a pilot, and I didn't, I was like 12. I didn't really understand what a pilot was. I came to understand what it was. But, Happy Days, according to Gary Marshall's book, had a very slow ramp up to becoming a series. It was made as a pilot. The pilot did not sell. And most of your listeners will understand that a pilot is, an episode of the show that sort of lays out where the show's going to go and has most of the characters already in it. And then if a network feels like they can sell it and sell a lot of advertising, then they contract it, make it into a series. In this case, they did not. They turned it down. Nobody wanted to buy it. And it was aired on ABC's Love American Style as a kind of a episode. And Henry Winkler was not in the pilot, but Ron was, and I believe Anson and Donnie, but I don't remember actually. Anyway, it sat on the shelves at Paramount for quite a while, or at least a year, until Ron Howard had such success with American Graffiti. And when that was a hit, someone at Paramount wisely said, now, don't we have a 50s show, a product here with Ron Howard in it? And that was what made them put it on the air. And then so it was really a very, very slow and kind of a lucky break, all of it around Ron Howard, really, because he's the one that initially starred in it and then also made it possible to go to series.
Yeah, and one of the things I've read about Happy Days, why it seemed to be so big, is because it sort of brought us back to what we thought was a simpler time, maybe the 50s and early 60s. Of course, when you think of it, that we were in the throes of the Cold War back then, so I don't know how simple it was, but it certainly seemed to be a simpler time. And Marion, you were so wonderful in your role as Mrs.C. You were everybody's mom.
I was just perfect. I really was perfect. And I loved all the guys. And it was all about young guys in a way. So the fact that I was the mother, I always had a good time every day. Every day. We just had fun.
You did. And I got to ask you, Jim, are you able to give us an impersonation of the Fonz?
Hey, come on. Of course I can. Yeah. But Henry's two different people, because the Fonz was like this. He was this character like this. But Henry, if you talk to Henry Winkler, he has a very different, distinct way of talking. And he's very careful that you understand that he is paying attention to you and giving you his full regard.
And Tom Bosley played your husband, Marion, on Happy Days.
And Tom Bosley was so difficult to work with. He was so difficult. I tell you, a husband. Now we got a husband. And oh gosh, I couldn't believe it.
He was. Now, he was a stage actor, wasn't he?
He had won big awards on Broadway, So he felt he was a pretty important guy. And he was, accepting that he was hard to get along with. I found him very hard to get along with.
It's funny when you read stories about TV shows and movies, sometimes you're surprised that some people, they have different ways they work, and other people may see, hey, they seem to be a little difficult to work with, and other people seem to be, just lots of fun, and it all depends on that way that person works. Now, that show lasted 11 seasons. So, Jim, you had to share your mom with the whole country for 11 seasons. What was that like?
It was great. She was gainfully employed. She was having the time of her life. She was treated like a superstar. She got to travel the world and meet all these incredible people. She met all the celebrities of the day, from, Keith Moon to Andy Warhol. And it improved our living conditions a lot. I mean, she had been a struggling actress raising two kids on her own. And we suddenly had enough money to buy, a hair blower and other amenities. I remember that specifically because I desperately wanted, a blow dryer for my long golden locks that sadly are lost to history. And she had a nice hot rod, kind of a nice sports car that she drove that eventually I got to drive. And, it was lovely. And it was lovely to see her come from a person who was kind of not insecure, but struggling against trying to make this goal of hers and not necessarily, making a lot of progress.
I wanted to be an actress.
She wanted to be a well-known actress, and she was a terrific actress already, but she didn't have her foot in the door in a big way, and she made it happen. And then afterwards, it was I felt like you relaxed, particularly once you made your peace with Tom and you knew where the boundaries were. Then she began to relax into this wonderful career.
And we had a ball team, a softball team.
That's right.
And it was very important.
She played a lot of softball.
But it was great because we played all the big cities,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chicago, great. Boston, and even you went overseas. I think you played in Okinawa and
We did. We
Germany, maybe.
Yeah.
All over the place. I mean, it was just
Yeah.
really, really great. And Gary Marshall had the brilliant idea of, during the hiatus period when they weren't shooting, to keep those young men in the cast who were in their 20s and had bags and bags of money, keep them busy at a time where, you know, they could have spun off into all kinds of unhealthy things. He kept them busy with softball, which they loved. So it was sports.
Yeah.
And Ron Howard's a great athlete.
Yeah.
And his brother Clint.
Clint.
They were all there. Anyway.
That's great. You know, I was going to ask about the ball team because you mentioned it in your book. I was thinking, you know, I worked in corporate for many years, and occasionally we go on a retreat and they'd make us do an activity. One time it was, I think, paintball, and we were on teams, and it was sort of like team building and all these things. But when I heard about this softball team, I thought, who are you playing against? Who are your opponents?
Oh, there's celebrities from, like, radio DJs from the local town that they're in, local celebrities from wherever they went, people that were on another show.
Yeah.
Right.
But this was serious business.
Oh, very seriously. Yeah.
Yeah. Was the Fonz any good on the ball field?
The Fonz did all the pitching,
He became a very good pitcher.
and he looked good out there, you know.
And he had never played before, but he started to train seriously, and he became a very good pitcher.
I guess you never know what kind of hidden talent some people might have. Now, Marion, in your book, you mentioned that you were a strong kid, and I guess that helped you on the softball field later on, didn't it?
I was a very good athlete and I was sturdy, but I loved it. But we went, and the fact that we would travel around from city to city and meet thousands of people and meet them as if we knew them. And it was important to us.
That is so fun. Now, I think when I watch Happy Days, it does. I mean, it's great comedy, first of all, but you just get to know the characters. So when the run ended in 1984, I felt like I'm going to miss these people. I'm going to miss these characters, you know? I mean, the actors and actresses were going on their way, but the characters of Mrs.C and the Fonz and Richie and...
You know, and everybody got along so well. And it's just a wonderment that the show Happy Days went on so long. It
did, and it was a great show. So you did do some other things afterward. One of the roles was a voice acting role that really surprised me. Was that you were SpongeBob SquarePants' grandmother?
And she still does it today. I mean, she recorded, I record her at my house in my studio, and she did an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants just last month.
I love it. Jim, you and I are roughly the same age here, so you probably remember the old classic Warner Brother cartoons. I mean, the Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner, those were just great. So I never thought there could be any cartoon character today that could match up with Bugs Bunny, but I think SpongeBob is close.
Very close. Yeah, I think so too. Tom Kenny, wonderful performer. And in fact, he directs a lot of the episodes now. He directed Mom in the last SpongeBob episode.
Oh, that is great. And then, of course, my daughter is a big fan of Gilmore Girls, and you played the great grandma on that show, and it was Lorelai Trix Gilmore. Did you enjoy playing that role?
I loved Gilmore Girls. Just loved it a lot.
That's great. Marion, it sounds like you've had a lot of fun in the roles you've played in your career, but tell me, when you wrote your autobiography, what was the main message you wanted to convey to your readers?
I think it was, you can be anything.
Yeah.
And I thought, you can do it.
And that's the message that you're getting through in your book, clearly. And it tells such a really great story, Marion, and a lot of details. You come out and tell a lot about your life. And as Jim said before, the different actors and actresses that you ran into and all the great personalities. And we talked about at the beginning of this interview that your family lived through the Great Depression. And to some extent, that experience just made you who you were, because you had to experience those tough times and living down in the basement. But even though you were down in the basement, your dreams kept growing and they became a reality.
Yeah. No, the basement was very important because That's where we had the washing machine and the
canned goods. Yeah, you
Oh,
can't get much lower than that. It's a great place to start from.
no.
My wife sends me down there if I misbehave. I end up in the basement. So I'm
Right,
down there with
so-
the canned goods and the washing machine.
And the troll, right?
Anyway, this has been a wonderful time, Marion
Thank
and
you.
Jim. I want to thank you so much for your kindness and being willing to speak to us. And I want to highly recommend your book, My Days, Happy and Otherwise. It's just fantastic.
I
Wow.
enjoyed talking to you. You're a lovely man, darling. Yes.
Oh, you made my day, Marion. And Jim, thank you so much for
Welcome.
joining us.
And if your listeners are interested, I'm on a program called the Big Door Prize on Apple TV Plus with Chris O'Dowd. Fun show.
I think that's fantastic. And Jim, what other things are you up to these days?
You know, this and that. I'm all over social media making videos. I've got stuff on TikTok and Instagram Live. I just worked on Chicago Fire, an episode of that. And you can also see me on American Auto popping up every now and then on NBC. So, and of course, I'm Colonel Sanders on your radio commercials and your TV spots too for KFC. That's quite a good brand there. It wouldn't kill you to go buy a bucket of chicken, if you know what I mean.
Also, I want to direct people to one of our previous episodes with Jim Meskimen, which was season 7, episode 2. Jim, when we spoke to you last, you mentioned that you were on Apollo 13. Well, I just watched Apollo 13 for the first time ever, believe it or not.
Wow.
And I caught you on that movie. Of course, The Grinch, we love you in that movie. And there's so many other times that you've appeared, including, before we go, Jim, you did appear in at least one episode of Happy Days. And could you tell us real quick about that before we finish
Real
up?
quick, yeah, I was, it's the famous Fonzie Jumps the Shark episode. Happy Days family went to Hollywood and they went to the beach and I was on that beach and me and Jerry Paris's son, Andy, were hired and we would come running down the beach and we say, they got a shark out there. We actually announced the shark. We delivered that important exposition and the rest is history.
Well, thank you both. And Marion, I wish you the very best, and you too, Jim, and continue with that SpongeBob. I'm going to be listening out for Grandma SpongeBob.
You'll hear. Okay,
Okay.
thanks a lot.
All right.
All
Thank
right,
you.
guys. Thanks. God bless.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Your History, Your Story. You can connect with us on Facebook and YouTube at Your History, Your Story, or on Instagram and Twitter at yhys podcast. We'd love to hear from you if you have any questions, comments, or a story to tell. Be well and God bless.